Welcome to the DMA's Virtual Tour 2021. In spite of all the challenges of 2021, we have seen growth in industry and the change of behavior, all heading in a positive direction. Our theme this year is Agility, Adaptability and Relevance. Thanks to the great strategic planning and the support of my board, the DMA has made significant strides. Can you imagine if digital communication was not as progressive as it is today? We'd be doing this on dial-up, and that wouldn't happen. Now, when it comes to relevance, I think this could well be the overriding objective of our 2021 national tour. How does the DMA and its many direct and integrated marketing members stay relevant when there's so much serious stuff going on? When real human lives are lost and business suffers by the billions? How does what we do in the greatest scheme of things affect our industry? The answer is that when unemployment hits an unheard of 34%, what we do absolutely fits in to what South Africa is needed right now. We deliver a better quality of life through our people and the work we do. We help business sell stuff, and that's what keeps the economy moving. It needs to move, especially now. This is our firm view, and we strive to hold markets relevant and direct marketing at the heart of the economic drive. But we need specifics, and we're here today to hopefully give you the nuts and bolts and some details, and this will help marketers shape the key sector that contributes so much to our local economy. I think we're all looking forward to exchanging ideas, sharing expertise with new and familiar faces in this virtual tour. No doubt many of you saw that on the 1st of April, we introduced a new category of DMA membership, our individual membership. This recognizes the obvious fact that many of us have moved out of our headquarters and many new SMEs and individuals are self-employed. The agents and they are also sole proprietors. Like corporate members, however, the SME professionals are also bound by POPIA and other legislation and would therefore find value in the circle of our protection that comes from our commitment to members through education and our many offerings. As you would know, there are numerous benefits of joining this country's most trusted non-profit marketing industry association. With this in mind, we're looking forward to welcoming more individuals, students and young entrepreneurs. So join, you can, as an individual member. I briefly alluded to POPIA a minute ago, and I want to draw your attention to an important document on the DMASA.org website. Legislation aside, the 10 guiding principles that we authored here at the DMA should be looked at by direct marketers. This document provides insight into 10 important areas that lead generators need to take note of and adhere to. Some examples include a commitment to not buying and selling information that has no consent, or information gained through questionable means. In addition, the document also makes it very clear that processing data without the subject's knowledge is also a no-no, as is using blanket third-party consent. While the article makes for interesting reading, I should also mention that it's important to remember that each company and the context in which it processes the data, they are unique. It's always important to get professional advice on your specific environment to make sure that you are complying with POPIA. Fortunately, it's not always necessary for DMA members to solicit professional and often expensive advice. POPIA-related advice can be seen and given on our website, but what we have introduced is the DPCP, a data compliance program in the run-up to the implementation of POPIA and the current legislation. So what does this mean? This means the DMA member now has access to a handy online toolkit that enables them to build and maintain their own compliance frameworks. And in terms of POPIA Regulation 4, this is necessary. The DMA Data Protection Compliance Program also assesses compliance with the Act in mind, and you can do this in minutes. For those of you that have not already done so, I encourage you to visit our DMASA compliance portal. It's easy. You just click onto our website, you'll get an added pop-up and you link straight through to the DMASA portal. I'd like to draw your attention to the important research that the DMASA is conducting to help us better serve you, our members, and the sector at large. Please look out for 20 questions that you'll receive in the mail. We believe we've managed to provide a valuable service to the industry for the betterment of all. We've been here for past 3 decades, trying to service you and answer the needs and the questions that you pose to us. So look out for that research. No national tour would be complete without mention of the ASAGAI Awards. They are prestigious awards, and here we have 2 important points of interest I'd like to mention. Firstly, you already know the entries have been extended to the 15th of September, so you have time to put in all your competition entries. We're also hosting the actual awards evening on the 11th of November, a glitzy glamour affair, and we hope to see you all there. Secondly, many of you might not already know this, but we have secured top 3 international judges from the globe. I'd like to introduce Annie-Sophie Sell, and she's from the Publicis Group Germany. She's been a jury president of Max Awards and describes herself as a passionate creative, dedicated to developing impact, communication ideas, and to contribute to agile growth. We're also welcoming Matthias Andersson, who's co-founder and partner at Milton in Sweden. He's a judge of the Echoes and chairman and jury of Guldvik Sweden Svedma accolades. Cesar Vasciano is also president and CEO of Scopen, marketing advertiser and leader that has helped to transform business across 12 markets. He's one of Spain's best-known communication consultants, and he's regularly called upon in his unique strategic vision. We'd like to welcome them for their service and for being part of our ASAGAI Awards. And obviously, our South African judges, they come highly recommended and they're also used globally. I'd like to say a big thank you to them. Without them, the awards would not be the quality it is. In conclusion, thank you for your time today, and I think it's time to hear from the other voices. We have passionate professionals that will give you more insight into direct marketing.
Hello, my name is Emma Lockwood and I am the COO of Weavend Online. I firstly want to thank the DMASA for inviting me to participate in this national roadshow. It is a privilege to be a speaker and I'm grateful for the opportunity. The theme for the national roadshow this year is agility, adaptability, and relevance. I personally can't think of a theme that is more suited for the year that we have all undergone, which has been filled with many challenges to say the least. The global COVID-19 pandemic has affected all walks and spheres of life and has sadly had devastating effects on the businesses, industries, economy, and the livelihoods of all people. Despite being in the throes of a global pandemic, South Africans have adapted and adjusted their thinking, practices, and businesses to align with the new normal that we all find ourselves in. Some businesses have been fortunate enough to thrive in this new normal, which is a tribute to their agility to fit in with this new status quo, their ability to adapt to the new needs of their market, and their drive to stay relevant. As I said earlier, I'm from Weavend Online, and we are an innovative alternative legal services provider and legal tech company. We are the technical service provider to the DMASA Data Protection Compliance Portal, as well as the DMASA online learning platform. We offer unique legal compliance advisory and support services, which are aimed at simplifying compliance with prevailing data protection laws. One of these laws being the Protection of Personal Information Act, more commonly known as POPI or POPIA. POPIA has been with us for quite some time. However, the deadline for responsible parties to establish compliance with POPIA was the 30th of June 2021. Now, you may be thinking, what does it mean to establish compliance with POPIA? How do you become POPIA compliant? Unfortunately, there is no simple answer to this, but it does require businesses to evaluate the way that they process personal information and whether that processing is aligned with the requirements of POPIA. It is important for all employees of your organization to know the effects of POPIA and how your organization needs to comply with the requirements of POPIA. However, the responsibility of POPIA compliance lies with the information officer of your organization. If you are that information officer, I need your attention and I need you to focus. POPIA and the regulations thereto set out the requirements that must be undertaken by responsible parties in order to achieve compliance. There are certain responsibilities that POPIA has placed on your shoulders, and there are tasks that must be undertaken by your organization. Amongst other things, you have to ensure that your organization conducts a personal impact assessment, develops, implements, and maintains a compliance framework, develops a PIA manual, ensures that there are adequate systems in place to process requests for access to personal information, and you must ensure that internal awareness sessions are conducted regarding POPIA, the regulations, codes of conduct, and information issued by the information regulator. A lot of the POPIA panic is caused by a lack of knowledge and understanding of what POPIA entails and the effects that it has on your business. People don't know what they need to do or where they need to start. However, you unfortunately can't be like an ostrich and bury your head in the sand. And unfortunately, ignorance of the law is not a valid legal defense. The solution is to get started and to tackle this journey head on. The DMASA, in association with Weaving Online, bring you the DMASA Data Protection Compliance Portal, which has been designed to serve as a central resource for organizations to achieve and maintain compliance with POPIA. It is accessible to members and non-members and is the simplest and easiest way to start your compliance journey. As I mentioned earlier, one of the responsibilities of the information officer is ensuring that your employees receive training in POPIA, which is something that can be done via the DMASA online learning platform, which is also available to members and non-members. The DMASA has collaborated with eStudy, an online accredited training provider, and Weaving Online to bring you a range of short but comprehensive courses on POPIA. These courses cover not only what each and every employer has to know about POPIA, but also what your marketing, legal, finance, HR, and IT employees must do to comply with the Act. The courses have been designed to not only teach you about the theory of POPIA, but how it practically applies to the processes used by your employees in the marketing, legal, finance, HR, and IT departments of your organization. By obtaining this training, you fulfill that responsibility of ensuring that your employees are trained in the provisions of POPIA. Don't let the POPI panic overwhelm you, but let it fuel you to get you going on your compliance journey. Please visit dmasacomplianceportal.org and dmasalearning.org or contact us for more information. Thank you.
Hi everyone, today we're going to chat a bit about POPI. So as you know, POPI has been fully enforced about 2 months now, and a lot of that initial panic that everybody had has subsided a little, and now we're having very good conversations around how do we apply POPI in our environment. There's still a lot of uncertainty around how to interpret these sections, especially within the direct marketing space. And that reason is mainly there's no case law, the information regulators publishing guidelines on various different things. But in the meantime, companies need to know how do we apply it. So what the DMA did, it went to some leading privacy professionals and got them to advise us on some of these key topics that's top of mind for all direct marketers. Those are published in 2 documents. You'll see there are the 10 guiding principles for ethical lead generation, as well as POPI FAQs. You'll find that on the DMA's websites, their social media sites, and if you can't find it, just pop them an email and they'll provide you with that. In interpreting this, it's very important to know that at the best of our abilities, the leading privacy professionals gave us their views on how they interpret and see the different provisions to give you guidance on how to apply it. However, the information regulator courts in the future might take a little bit of a different view, but in the meantime, it really gives us a proper understanding of how you can interpret that within your environment. We will continue to give you updates if anything changes, but POPI also requires you to look at international law and how international industries actually interpret very similar sections. And we're lucky that POPI is very similar to some of the international jurisdictions, which means they are far ahead, 20 plus years in data protection. So a lot of the advice that we've been given takes into account how these similar provisions are looked at abroad. So it can give us some guidance on what could and how it can unfold in our industry. So what does that mean for us? It's very important to note that Poppy is not here to kill direct marketing as a start. Poppy is not here to kill direct marketing. To the contrary, you'll see in the Act it also says Poppy is here to build, and you can really use Poppy to your advantage. However, there are certain guiding principles that Poppy does state that direct marketers needs to comply with when conducting direct marketing in the industry. So today we're going to be focusing on 2 questions. There's a lot of topics covered in the documents I mentioned. Please refer to them. There's not enough time to go through them, but I'm going to run through 2 main questions that we keep getting. The one is telemarketing. Like, does Poppy apply to it or not? Does Section 69 apply to it or not? And what does that mean? And the other one is Section 69. What does that mean? Consent, opt-in, customer bases. And we're going to briefly chat about those today. So the first one is telemarketing. Does telemarketing fall within the ambit of Section 69? And I think the short answer to that question is no. Now, there's a lot of different opinions and views, and from the leading privacy professionals that we've consulted with, many of them have a similar view. And in the absence of a different view from the information regulator and or courts, this is the advice that we're giving at the moment, is that telemarketing does not fall within Section 69, meaning you don't need prior consent to dial telemarketing campaigns. However, it's very important to know that Poppy does apply to telemarketing. It does not mean Poppy doesn't apply. A company conducting telemarketing still has to apply with the 8 conditions of lawful processing. And most importantly, it really needs to know that the data sets that you're using that is obtained lawfully, and it applies to the other sections, Sections 12, you justify your processing in terms of Section 11. So that's a lot of sections, and we don't want to go through that. Make sure you speak to your privacy professional. But why we're saying that telemarketing does not fall within the ambit of Section 69 is we look at the definition of electronic communication. Now, Section 69 says if you conduct unsolicited electronic communications, then you either need to have consent, prior consent, or you need to make sure that it is your customer. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But for now, the definition of electronic communication is, it says that it's any text, voice, sound, or image message sent over an electronic communications network which is stored in the network or in the recipient's terminal equipment until it's collected by the recipient. That's a lot of words. So what are we saying here? We're saying in order for us to tick that box, we need to kind of tick 3 things. One, it's any text, voice, or sound message, an easy one. Second one is it's sent over an electronic communications network. And then the important one to note here, which is the differentiators, which is stored in the network or in the recipient's terminal equipment until it's collected by the recipient. So for Section 69 to apply, all of these 3 elements needs to be applicable. It's not enough that a message is sent over an electronic communications network. The message must also be stored in that network until it's collected by the data subject. So that is an example of pure electronic communications would be SMS, automated voice messages, your AVM robocalls, emails. Those are seen as pure electronic communications, and Section 69 would apply. In the case of telephone calls, whether it's transmitted through mobile networks, fixed networks, or voice over internet protocols, it does not fit the definition of electronic communications, and therefore don't have to comply with Section 69 in terms of this interpretation. However, again, Poppy still applies, and you need to apply with the other provisions of Poppy. This is mainly because the message is not stored in the network or in the recipient's terminal equipment until it's collected by the recipient. It's also important that a close examination of the South African Rural Report Commission's report revealed that it was a calculated decision based on a strategic decision made by the Department of Trade and Industry to promote call centers within South Africa and to offer incentives to attract call centers business to South Africa. So in short, looking at job creation, our call center industry provides a very, very big component of job opportunities. And a strategic decision was made, if you look at the notes from the South African Law Report Commission, to exclude telemarketing from the ambit of Section 69. So in summary, with the absence of a different view taken by courts on the information regulator, the guidance that we've been given is that telemarketing does not fall within the ambit of electronic communications, meaning you can contact telemarketing campaigns without prior consent. You do, however, have to make sure that you comply with all of the other provisions, making sure the databases that you have are obtained lawfully and you can justify having them and processing them the way that you do. So now what if you feel, okay, great, I've got a base, or the channel that I'm using now is not telemarketing, but I'm using your electronic channels, your SMSs, your AVMs, your emails. What then? Well, then Section 69 applies. And what that says is there's this myth of saying you either have to have consent for anything and everything you do, or the contrary, to say if you have this big blanket consent, you can do whatever you want. And that's not true. Section 69 says that if you want to use electronic communications, direct marketing, on SMS, voicemail, those type of things, you need to make sure you either have prior consent, written consent, or it is your customer. So looking at consent, we need to make sure it fits the definition. The definition of consent is voluntary, specific, and informed expression of will. So going into that one layer deeper, firstly, voluntary. It must be a genuine choice of the data subject. It can't be a forced or a major condition of something if it's not a balanced approach. Specific. The consent must always relate to specific, well-articulated purpose. Blanket consent can't be given anymore. This covering anything and everything for anybody's allowed to market to you for any type of purpose, that does not meet the requirement of specific and informed consent. Informed, transparency, like this is the one thing you need to know. The consent must be worded in such a way that the data subject is put in a position to make an informed decision. There's transparency. The data subject knows who they're giving consent to and exactly what it is. There needs to be enough granularity to your consent that they need to understand those components for it to be valid consent. And lastly, an expression of will. The consent must be explicit, which means that it has to be given by means of a clear, unambiguous affirmative act. It cannot be lobbed into T's and C's. There's this silent kind of version of consent. There needs to be a clear expression of will. So what does this tell us? This tells us that you need to tick those boxes before you can actually claim that it is consent. So consent is used very loosely in the market, or opt-in. So go review the type of, if you feel you have consent for your basis, go through those elements, look at the FAQs documents that gives a little bit more detail, specifically on Form 4. The Information Regulator published guidelines that says not only does it have to meet the definition of Form 4 consent, it also has to be in the format as prescribed on Form 4. Now, luckily, it doesn't have to be verbatim as per the form, especially difficult if you're looking at different digital channels. So the document published by the DMA gives a little bit more guidance on how you can apply Form 4 practically within different environments. Now, what if you feel, okay, I don't feel I need consent because I think this is my customer. Again, there's certain requirements that you need to make sure that is it truly a customer as seen within the POPI environment. You can't just claim anybody on your base is a customer of yours. We need to look at how you engage with them. So the first thing is we need to make sure that the responsible party, the POPI says, the responsible party obtained the contact details of the data subject in the context of the sale of products or services. It also says that the responsible party then is marketing their own products or services, and the data subject needs to be given a reasonable opportunity to object for future processing for that purpose. Now, it's important to remember that you need to comply with all three of those elements to justify that it is your customer. So if we say that the contact details was obtained in the context of the sale of products or services, what that merely says is that in the process of engaging with the data subject in either negotiation, quote phase, or concluding a sale for goods or services, the responsible party obtained their details. It wasn't obtained at a later stage. Secondly, if we're looking at now, a very big component is now the responsible party wants to market its own similar goods or services. And here we need to make sure, and an example that we can give you, the goods that the responsible party is now offering is similar to the original goods. So if I bought potatoes at a grocery store, to give you an example, now I receive SMS message from this grocery store about a special on tin goods, milk, something similar. Would you see that as similar goods than the original ones I purchased? In the context of a grocery store, most possibly, yes, it can be deemed similar. But if that grocery store now sends me SMSs about insurance messages from a different insurer, then most probably that won't be deemed similar goods than the original stuff of the responsible party. So that is kind of the distinctions you need to make when looking at it. In that case, the grocery store must probably need additional consent. However, you need to be able to look at your different databases, and I really encourage you to seek advice from privacy professionals that has experience in direct marketing. How you obtain your databases, engage with them over a period of time, really can make a difference in how to make sure that you comply with these sections. And most importantly, in closing, is your opt-out component. It always has been, and sometimes it should not be overlooked, the importance of making sure at all times you provide a data subject with the opportunity to opt out. Companies need to invest in training their agents, making sure their systems and contracts allow for clear processes on how to make sure that it's not difficult for a data subject to opt out. You're going to get into trouble if it's an extremely difficult process. A data subject struggles a lot to actually just ask you to stop contacting them. So as a first, that is the most important thing for you to go and check that is a clean and it's an easy thing to tick off. So in summary, telemarketing needs to comply with POPI. You don't need to have prior consent in terms of this interpretation because it's not electronic communications. You must make sure that your consent, if you rely on an opt-in, applies to the provisions and the definition of consent, that there's enough granularity and transparency around it, or if it's your customer, it truly is your customer and you're marketing similar goods or services. And in closing, speak to somebody that can really advise you on how this applies to your engagement journey in your databases that you either have or that you're planning to build up. Before making drastic changes, consult with somebody. If you've got additional questions, you can always email them to the DMA and they will assist you as far as possible to answer more questions that you might have. In addition to going through the 10 guiding principles of ethical lead generation and the FAQ document on POPI. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mona Lisa Sibongile Zwambila, and I'm really excited to be here today. I'm talking about something that's really close to my heart, and I'll be talking on driving change in advertising. I'm a believer that change always starts with conversations, and I'm looking forward to having one with you in this session. I'd like to start off with a quote by Ava DuVernay. I'm sure most of you know her. She's a film director in Hollywood, and she's got a beautiful quote that talks about diversity. And she says, and I quote, "When you're talking about diversity, it's not a box to check. It is a reality that should be deeply felt and held and valued by all of us." And I think what's so poignant and important about this quote, especially within a South African context, is that we need to look at transformation, not for its own sake, not to tick BEE codes, but because of its importance in terms of driving change, within society and within business. I think what's really amazing about Ava is that within her frame of influence, she's able to insist on working with Black business. She's able to insist on working with Black creatives across the value chain because she understands, the importance of diversity. But I think also she understands what it delivers from a creativity perspective. And the work that she's done is really testimony to that, around the importance of, inclusion and diversity within everything that we do. Now, why is diversity important from a South African context? Just a couple of data points. What we see and know for sure is that 60% of South African women are the primary purchasers within the household, 60%. And yet we know that there are very few women-owned, Black women-owned agencies in South Africa. Another statistics, one that we all know, is that more than 90% of consumers are Black and people of color. And yet once again, when we talk transformation, we have very few Black-owned, agencies within the country. And we understand the importance of Black-owned businesses because we know that marketers on a daily basis are giving us briefs that are requesting and asking us to have an understanding of the target market, and who better placed to have an understanding of that than owners of agencies, that are Black and people of color. So diversity is critical, not only from a transformation perspective, but over and above that, from a business perspective. And I'd like to touch on that, just a little. And, who better than, to quote and to look at than McKinsey & Company, who for years have been doing a lot of work around diversity. Since 2014, they've been looking at, they've come out with reports that look at diversity and measure it in the context of performance, looking at your Fortune 500 companies and really looking at the numbers and the data points that create a compelling business case for diversity. And, just really quite high level and really just to positive point, I think what we see is that the business case for diversity remains strong. And we know this, the world continues to change. The cries for diversity globally have been louder than ever before. And here in South Africa, I think it's even more important because change has been slow, and we need to be sure that change comes. And what we see quite clearly from this slide is just the fact that companies that are more diverse outperform their peers. And in 2019, the data saw 36% better performance from companies that were more diverse. So the business case is compelling. Even if we look outside of the BEE codes and the need for transformation, there's a compelling business case to continue to drive change. And I'd like to continue with this narrative because this is really where the crux of my presentation sits in terms of really driving change within our industry, and specifically the advertising industry. So what I'd like to look at is really a view of transformation, which is one that is not spoken about enough. We need to ask ourselves, how diverse is our landscape? How diverse are the businesses, that are run by agencies, global agencies and independents? How diverse are they in the context of ownership? And this is really what I'd like to, look at, talking to today. And look at diversity beyond people, beyond, the number of executives within the team, but really start looking at ownership. And, the best way for us to do that, because there's very little data, within our sector, what we looked at was a very reputable publication, which is Mark Lives. And every year they look at a report around revenue ranking. And what we did is looked at the 2020 report from Mark Lives and really did a bit of searching to find some data points that were really critical to help inform, today's discussion. And so we really are looking at about 80 of South Africa's top agencies, and then really starting to, unpack some of the data that they shared on this report. And what's quite interesting is, not only interesting but startling, is that when we look at market share from a network and an independent agency view, we see that networks and multinationals really dominate the industry and the sector. Sitting at 68% of market share is owned by our multinationals. And what we know for sure is that multinationals are owned by, foreign businesses, which means the bulk of advertising spend is leaving our country, albeit obviously, there's been a lot of work in terms of changing, equity numbers. But I think outside of that, what's also a really important point to note is that level 1 BEE is now parity. When you look at the data, most agencies are a level 1 BEE. And so what it does is that it creates an extremely challenging environment for 100% Black-owned agencies to actually compete, because no room or no scope is being given to them to actually be able to get access and to really truly deliver on some of their own business imperatives. So, as we said, the picture is clear. Multinationals continue to dominate the industry, and we're looking at an advertising industry that's, has revenues in excess of 7 billion rand. So it's a really sizable chunk of business that is not being evenly and equitably distributed, and that has to change. We then looked at, the same data, but from a different viewpoint, and what we see is that Black-owned, 100% Black-owned agencies only have around 5% market share within this industry. And that's a really alarming number. If we look at, a pool of 7 billion rand, what it means in numbers is that 5% is being distributed. The revenue amount is between 350 and 500 million rand. And what's sad about that number is what we know for sure is that your telcos, your financial services businesses have budgets in excess of 600 million to 1 billion rand from a marketing spend perspective. And what we see is that very little of that money is being shared amongst 100% Black-owned agencies. And once again, something that needs to change. My last slide then looks at unpacking the same number, but really looking and zoning in on our independent agencies. We know that our 100% Black-owned agencies are all independent. And then within that pool of independents, the market share of 100% Black-owned agencies increases to 15%. But once again, still a very small number, in the bigger ecosystem. Another data point that we'd like to look at is our BEE Commission data. Every year they come out with a report just really analyzing trends across the variety of different sectors, as you can see on the graph. The one that's most important for us is obviously the MAC Charter, or the Marketing, Advertising and Communications area. And we see here as well that when we look at the percentage of ownership, it once again is really, really low. And so I think that starts to tell us and starts painting a picture that talks about the importance of really ensuring that we start looking at ownership as a huge imperative of change that we do need to start to drive. And we have to start looking at diversity through a different lens. It really is time to measure the growth and success of 100% Black-owned agencies and ensure that we start bringing them, into the game. Why is that? And I've been asked this question a lot. BEE is in place. A lot of the agencies that I'm speaking of are empowered agencies. They have anywhere from 25% to 51% Black ownership. Why is it so important for us to actually focus on 100% Black-owned agencies? And there's numerous reasons, for us to do that. But I think the two key ones for me is, one, ownership is an important measure for financial inclusion. And we know this when we look at, the diverse inequalities that exist within our country. Financial inclusion is critical. The second reason is because Black business has been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, and more recently, the looting. And so it creates a really compelling need for us to start thinking about how we ensure access and inclusion of 100% Black-owned agencies. So what I'd like to start by looking at is going back to basics. Transformation, by definition, a process by which one figure, expression or function is converted into another of similar value. This is an important definition because when we talk about transformation, invariably what we're doing is transforming what already exists, transforming the status quo. And in so doing, we do that, unfortunately, to the detriment of 100% Black-owned agencies that are actually trying, to get a stake within the sector. And hence again, our need to really make change happen. So transformation actually enables the status quo to thrive and empowers multinationals and large independent agencies to continue to win. And this is something, as I said earlier, we need to really look to address. So when we talk about driving change in advertising, this becomes something really important for us to look at. It is clear that we must move from transformation to change. Transformation really is no longer enough, and it's not helping the majority of people within this country. And so, taking a couple of steps back, what I looked at, I did some qualitative research on the lived experience of Black agency owners, because in this entire conversation, I really do represent the majority of them. I had one-on-one discussions and conversations with 15 Black agency owners, from the leading agency owners to those that are truly struggling to make it off the ground. But what was really sad is the reality that the challenges and barriers for all of these agencies remain the same. Access to work, opportunities to really be able to showcase their work continue, to be small and limited. and we need to truly address this. They've also a strong belief that the BEE codes are not empowering them, and they all are in agreement that BEE in its current form seeks to preserve the status quo to the detriment of really driving change within the sector. And so here's what all our Black agency owners had to say, and I quote, "We're tired of trying to convince business that we're capable of working on big brands, because we are. It's demoralizing to be told we're too small to do the work when we see other agencies given these opportunities, because we can. Our reputation as Black businesses must be judged by the best of us and not the worst of us, because we do great work. We shouldn't have to negotiate our value by reducing our costs just to get a small piece of your business. We should be paid fair value. And we're tired of being given a chance. We want to be given an opportunity." So let that sink in, because this is what we're hearing time and time again. We need to be given opportunities to grow businesses and to grow sustainable businesses, which is critical. And when we talk about change, who better than to quote than Barack Obama, who says change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. I'd like to change that last sentence, because the reality is that you are the change we seek. There is no ways, and it really will be impossible for Black agencies to actually make change and drive that change without the entire ecosystem really responding to the current circumstances, and that becomes critically important. So how do we do this? How do we grow that 5% share of market and build a more diverse and inclusive industry? We just need to do three things, and I think if all of us can commit to these three things, this change will begin to happen. One, we want the best creatives and the best talent in the industry to see Black-owned agencies as a place where they want to do great work, because we're capable. They do need to see us as a compelling proposition so that we can create amazing work that represents our capability. The second really important point is that pitch consultants must rethink their outdated models and work with business to drive change, because we're capable. The whole pitch process is a huge barrier, to entry, and we do need to start rethinking what that looks like in order to be able to be given opportunities to compete, equally. And the last point, and I think this is really the most substantial of all of them, is that business must commit to giving us a meaningful share of their marketing spend, because we are more than capable. And if we do those three things, I truly believe we'll start to see change within our industry, and we will begin to truly drive change in advertising.